Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining into another session with us, Kishin and Fabian.
Hi there.
Okay, so today we're going to talk about shift of perception, right? Um, the reason why we suffer is because of all this perception that is being taught to us or conditioned us all our life. So from the point that we learn that we need, in order for us to change, we need to see life or do things in a different way, right? We can't do things the same way, see things the same way, and expect it a different result. So shifting perception is all about, it's a very tiny shift. You can't have so much massive shift in one go, because it's all about relearning, unlearning old habits, way of seeing things, and trying to do and learn and behave in a different way. For example, say a maggot, right? A maggot live in very rotten food, and it that's its happiness, right? That's its world. But once a maggot become a fly, then its world change, and it it might still like the same food, but its sense of reality is very different. So the same thing with us. We see things because of how we believe, um, not only because we've been taught, but a lot of it is because we need to survive, right? Um, as a child growing up, in all stages of our life, not only do we need to survive, we need to be happy. And we develop way of behaving, we develop way of being that would achieve that. So it's not about just people teaching us and people brainwashing us and people brainwash us. It's not all about the puppet master. It's about us also changing in order to survive and thrive and be happy. Um, so it's so important that the moment that we realize that things are not working, we are suffering, and we want things to end or we want things to be different, then we will have a look. So come back to self-awareness and have a look and really question all our programs. One program is, how do we define happiness, right? Because that's a big incentive for everybody. Um, so in the beginning, our happiness is very much about satisfying the senses, satisfying our craving. The moment we want something, we want it to be satisfied. And in satisfying that craving or that wanting, there's pleasure, right? And that pleasure is happiness. But what it does is it teaches us codependence. It teaches us to dependent on something to be happy, or someone to be happy, or certain opinions, or very much external. So the first thing, the first shift in perception in happiness is to have a look at ourselves and see what can we gain happiness that is inside of us, that is independent of the external, right? So just to realize that, just to know that that is a shift. And then once there is a shift, then we explore ways of investigating how we go about finding that inner happiness. And that inner happiness is refocus, right? About shifting perception is also shifting our focus and attention in where we put our energy. So now we put our energy more into our qualities, for example, our kindness, our compassion, our equanimity, our peace, our intelligence. So we refocus and gain happiness in that. And then once we tap into jhana, it's a different kind of happiness. It's something that is bubbling. It's something that just gives us happiness for no reason. So that is a shift, right? And the ultimate shift is to ask who I am. And then we would go through, I am the body. No, I'm not the body. Once you transcend and see that. So there's a shift. Oh, I am my feeling, right? What I feel make me. Or the classic is what I am my thought, or what I think, or I am my awareness. And all these layers and layers, like again, like the onion, peeling. And each time we realize that we are not that, that is a shift. So finally, it's very hard to see I am not my knowing, I am not my awareness. It's very hard to see that, that aspect of the consciousness. So unless you have this experience where your consciousness is ceased, then it's so easily to identify as I am my pure awareness. It's very easily. But once you meditate to that, to the arupa, and you go to cessation, and you realize, nope, you are not consciousness, because consciousness gone too. When you're in that stage, in the final cessation, consciousness gone too. So you can't be I am consciousness. So that is a massive shift in understanding.
Yes. Yeah, well, okay, there's been already some questions to that. So I loved what the metaphor you brought up with the maggot and the fly. So before, when we dwell in our senses, which is actually compared to that happiness, which is sort of waiting for us to be discovered inside. The world of the maggot, like diving through rotten food and the dark earth and that's really representing, at least in my imagination, the pleasure of the senses. And then it sort of has this transformation, it has this change, and then its territory is the sky, right? It flies, and it's the space. So it's been through a total different change. So I really like that. So, and the first question is, so actually a shift of perception in itself is actually, it's basically, is it about the feelings? Because feelings and emotions is very important, isn't it? Like, so if at least that's my idea of say life, that people always want to have great feelings, right? So that's what actually motivates them, inspires them to do things, to think things, and whatever, to act and speak in a certain way. So it's all about happiness, and it's all about feelings, isn't it?
Well, again, you can't really tease out and say what comes first, the egg or the chicken, right? So as you shift, you will define what is happiness. Is happiness an intense feeling, right? Is happiness an intense emotion? And then, so, but the more you rely on this intense feeling and emotion as happiness, again, you'll be dependent, right? Because you're always chasing that something that would give you this intensity. But
Mhm.
so as you move inwards, there will be intense meditation experience that is independent of any external or senses. But also we might get attached to it and say, yes, this is my happiness. But whatever that we shift to and we land there and we identify and attach, that is our limit. Right? That is our anchor, right? So if we stay there, guess what our rebirth will be right there.
Hmm.
So
Yeah, the attachment to that state and stage is actually quite crucial. So we are actually going up the consciousness ladder, so to speak, but still there's ground to sort of stay on where the consciousness is sort of landing, right? So I totally understand, like, and for people who believe in rebirth, that's quite obvious. And when you say, even when you come to that very refined state of I am pure awareness or I am consciousness. So that's still not the end, right?
no, because whatever you define yourself as or attach or identified as, that's your limit. That's your anchor. You still be limit and anchor in reality, in existence. So there'll be the wheel of rebirth still happening. Um, so the strategy of this journey is we always shift our perception towards the wholesome, towards the refined, right?
Mhm.
And in that we condition our body, our mind to take pleasure in simplicity, in subtleness, in the refinement. So before it's very much like how we refine our taste. Before we just couldn't taste say tea, right? Something has to be like very intense stimulant, like spices and things, for us to taste. But as we shift and we condition our mind and our body, our feelings and all of that, we learn to love tea, right? um so but we got to understand that at the end, liberation is to liberate all perception, all anchor, cut all the anchor, cut all the attachment, cut all the limitation and identity. So you can say a non-self person is beyond that, right? Because when you're empty, of course, it's empty of perception. So there is no anchor anymore,
Hmm.
right?
And,
That
and and
person, mm,
sorry, I just asking, like, how do we actually it totally makes sense what you say, but how do we actually cut that then? Cut that stage and cut it, right?
is the journey. The journey is all about all that practice, right? Mindfulness, kindness, meditation, jhana, right? And as we do all of that, there will be obstacle, right? And our our problem solving is to see what obstacle and remove that. It's like the river, right? The river, it wants to move to the ocean, but there'll be obstacle, right? So if we remove that obstacle, the river will continue flowing. And as we remove that obstacle, that is our shift. We will,
Ah,
it required us to shift our perception, to shift our thinking so that we can remove that obstacle, because it can't be moved otherwise. Not by
yes.
not by feeling, not by anything. It has to be by wisdom. It has to be by changes of perception.
Yeah, that very much makes sense. Is actually to be linked to our talk we've had before when you said like the first 10 or 20 years, like there's not such a thing as actually enlightenment or nibbana happening, because the first years is abandoning or cutting through or overcoming the obstacles and the hindrances. So the stream is flowing more towards that direction, right? So
Mm.
that very much makes sense. Yeah.
You can think like this also. In the beginning, we are outside the forest, right? And our aim is right in the center of the forest. But there's this forest, it's very thick, right? Thick with our ignorance, thick with our habits, thick with our programs, beliefs, tons of our belief systems that is limiting us. So and then we given these tools, right, in our tool bag of knife and scissors, and like our tools is pretty blunt in the beginning because we're just learning how to use it. So we're cutting branches, one branch, so we hardly move anywhere. That's why
Yeah.
the first 20 years is so slow, because we are sharpening our techniques, our tools. We're sharpening our mindfulness. We're sharpening our ability to accept and let go. But we'll get better at it, right? And then so we'll make a dent into the forest.
Yes, that's a beautiful metaphor. So, yeah, and as this talk is about the shifting of perception, as you said before, very nicely, it's like from the beginning of our birth, it's actually like conditioned perception, right? So, is what like how we perceive the world in order to make us happy, and then the understanding of our happiness also changes, right? So before it's like feeding the senses, which is another crucial point. Like we're searching for external things, for external objects and stimulations and substances and distractions or whatever, in order to feel happy. But that happiness is like very, yeah, as you say, gross, a very raw sort of happiness, which is called pleasure, right? So and then we slowly but steady, like in our practicing, we sort of let go of this gross happinesses, right? Or like we train more towards that subtle happiness, that simplicity, that refined, wholesome happiness, which is focusing on our inner qualities. Just summarizing what you said. So yeah, so for me that totally makes sense. So we have to sort of live a different way, think a different way, and behave a different way in order to go inside, right?
Yeah, so things feed each other. So how you behave would affect your feeling, it would affect your thoughts, and what you think and feel would also affect your behavior. So you can't go and tease them separately.
Yes.
Yeah, so the first 10 20 years is also about that. Just be conscious of how you behave. Your action will causes you to think and feel, and causes people around you think and feel, um, and having developing empathy for that.
Hmm. Yeah. So can you talk a little bit more about the codependence? like as you said before, like as we're feeding the external, right? So and going satisfying the craving and the senses, which gives a pleasure. You said, well, it's you didn't really said that, but what I think is actually an illusionary happiness, right? So and as I experienced it myself, right? So if I had one beer, I'm like, okay, yeah, fine, that feels nice, but then you want to have more in order to get more of this feeling of, say, dizziness or whatever alcohol, makes you feel. And uh, yeah, so that's codependent. Is that codependence, or is that to be understood in a different way too?
Well, that's addiction. Addiction is quite different. Yeah, it is codependent. Well, addiction, what happened with addiction we covered earlier is that it raises your base of normality. So that's why the brain learn to adapt. It's with every drug. It's not just alcohol, with also prescription and medication, right? That's why there is this movement of antibiotics. We need to restrict it because we'll end up breeding bugs that is able to adapt and live with our antibiotics, and it'll become superbug. Uh, that's why,
Yes, yes.
yeah, that's the same thing with addiction, right? We train our body to adapt to that level, and we teach it. We say, this is your, it seems pleasure to us, but what we are training our brain and our feeling and our things say, hey, this is our new normal, right? So if you want to get to work, just have a normal day, you have to drink more to get to the level of normal, because we've conditioned our body to depend on a certain amount. Because if you
Yes.
don't give it, it'll go into withdrawal, so you can't work and things like that.
So yeah, the external or the substance-based sort of happiness is actually a borrowed happiness. So it's just actually you borrow it from that substance, but in the end, you have to give it back, and that's actually in form of a stress and suffering, as you don't have that substance, and then you need more. And I mean, we talked about this addiction level already, but yeah, it's very crucial actually. This codependence, so
But
that you need.
you gotta also understand that life itself, or phenomenon, or existence, or everything is codependent, right? Um, that's why it's impermanent. It's impermanent because one moment can't stand and exist in itself. It's dependent, right? It dependent from the previous, and then it give rise to the next. So the whole universe law of existence is codependent.
Yes, that's a very mind-blowing one. Like, I really love when I read the Pali Canon, and then the Buddha speaks about the dependent origination, which is like 12 things, like actually in a circle, sort of that builds up on that's built up on this, and that's the ground for that to grow, and then. I really love that because it just makes so much sense, and it's actually quite logically and analytically explained, but makes so much sense. For me,
Oh
that
no.
was super. And then you crave for it, or you crave for it to disappear, and then you cling onto this, and that is such a big mess of things, right?
Yes. Yes. Um, Uh, yeah, for yes, if you are into Buddhism and you want to learn some more, then yes, delve into that. But be careful that you don't let knowledge be your path. It's always your knowledge is to remove obstacle. It's always your knowledge is to shift perception. So knowledge is not in and of itself. It can be a distraction, and it can be very dangerous because you just be spending time, and instead of like shifting your perception towards nibbana, you actually just become a scholar.
Yes, yes, because you can't think your way through it, right? You cannot just think and then something's going to happen. So sometimes maybe, you know, there have been times when, in case of at the Buddha's times, when the Buddha spoke, and then people actually attaining liberation by just listening to it and actually
Mm,
knowing. But their
that's
mind
that's
must have been very sharp already, right? So
yeah, that's a different phenomenon. It's not just about uh, now you gotta understand the Buddha is a non-self person, right? And not only is a non-self person, he is a very developed already, even before he attained. Um, so when he did attain, he would have all these psychic powers. Oh, that's another thing I forgot to mention in the non-self video is that every non-self would have a distinct, you could say, psychic power, so to speak. A certain unique ability that is theirs. um, but if you develop already of different aspect, then when nibbana come, then that aspect becomes strong, or you added another dimension to it. But even if you got nothing, no developments of any psychic powers, but when this the facts that is a non-self, there is also already a presence, right? That's another aspect we didn't discuss, is about the energy aspect of a non-self, right?
yeah,
So
I mean that must be a total entire session we're gonna because I have so many questions about that already coming up. Like for instance, if a person, you know, who's empathetic, sort of good in sort of thinking about the other person, so that person has this inclination once attaining nibbana or non-self, then that person has the psychic power of reading the minds of others, maybe. So maybe next session or something, we can talk about that.
I
I love it.
well I can't talk about psychic powers because I don't know very much about it. But what I do know is the Buddha is non-self, and he would have a very, very big presence, like an energy field, so to speak, that influence people. And it does, and it do require some kind of development or openness, or um, uh, um, some kind of practice, or already from the recipient, from the other person, to let this energy affected them, right? So it's kind of like a two-way. You can't just be not, totally undeveloped and then just be in the presence of the Buddha and hope for the best. It doesn't work that way. um, he provides the condition, the such a conducive condition, but it also need the other person to be ready and be
Yeah,
open.
yeah. So, but would you say that every person who is attaining towards enlightenment has a certain energy field, and is that energy field
Okay.
always from the same, say, characteristics? So like peaceful at all, or is it happy,
Well,
bubbling? Or...
um, we talk about vibes, right? We talk about aura, and we can all feel when somebody is angry. We can feel their anger, and we don't want to be close to them. Or somebody who is very sad, we can feel their vibe or their aura, and it's very hard to be close to them. So you can see how a person's state of mind generate an energy, right? An energy field around them. So you can also understand now that, say, if you are in jhana and you are all bubbly and you are all purified, and your state of mind is quite empathetic and kind, and so people would feel that, right? So there is an energy there. um, so so in that way, as we train, not only are we shifting our perception, we are also purifying our mind, and we are radiating out an energy field that already is a positive influence for people around us.
Mm-hmm. That's such an interesting topic for me. But just to, as we're getting close to the to our limit, just wanted to maybe just mention the steps you've mentioned, of how to change the perception again. So the first you said is actually pretty much it starts with mindfulness, right? So to be mindful, and then you sort of you look inside, and it's sort of you knowing sort of what makes you happy from the inside, and so the sort of independent happiness actually, and then you knowing it, and that already sort of is causing a shift to happen. And then the second step you said is that you basically exploring the ways and following that happiness, like you mentioned some qualities which you have inside, like generosity and gratefulness and loving kindness. So sort of you dive into it, into this feeling of happiness more, and then you say this way you sort of make the happiness even bigger. Is that correct?
Well, um, I'm only saying that just as an example. It's not an actual 1, 2, 3 step that a person has to do. It's a practice that we have to do a little bit in all aspect of our life and in all aspect of ourselves, right? So mindfulness, meditation, kindness, the Eightfold Path. The Eightfold Path, we don't just practice 1, 2, 3, and 4. It's the whole lot in one go, right? And because the reason why is because one feeding to the other, support the other, is supporting factors for the other, and so on. It's cascading and helping all the factors to move along together. But what I'm saying is, as we practice all of that kindness and mindfulness and meditation, we will encounter obstacle. We will get stuck somewhere, right? And it's often the stuckness is in our perception, it's in our identity, it's in the way we perceive ourselves, or the way we perceive kindness. It, like if you're stuck with how to forgive somebody, right? So then you have to shift the perception of, how can I see this person another way so that I can forgive this person, right? So that is a shift, right? So using obstacle as your teacher to know where to shift, what to shift.
Yeah, that's beautiful. The beautiful way of changing the perception, actually, to see the emotions and the feelings coming up, not as that's me, but to see it as a teacher. That's a beautiful way of actually describing it, and actually that, for at least in my understanding, it sort of causes the understanding of being closer to non-self, because you see that everything is dependent on sort of each other, and there's actually not just a fixed core. So you realize that you build up, or this feeling you've taken to be yours is actually built up and coming from different causes. and yeah, and they're so pretty much conditioned and empty. So yeah, that's a beautiful way of mentioning that. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's a big topic, perception. Um, and then we will, what would you like to cover? The energy aspect, or would you like to continue on with, um, I think the next topic is talking about definition. Um, it's
Mm.
related to perception, right? Because how we define ourselves, um, the talk that we have in our mind, the chatter, that's labeling ourselves, that's defining ourselves, and it's very important, because how we define ourselves, that is what we are. We determine our reality by our definitions.
Yes, that's a beautiful one to cover. I mean, both like the energy and that one is basically going towards the same direction. It's just a question what we're going to start with first. So yeah, well, we find out. So one
Stay
of those.
tuned.
Yes. Okay. See you
Bye,
next time.
everybody. Thank you.